today. That was actually wonderful to have Aubrey introduce my talk. I now have a lot more things I can talk about, so that's great. So I must be getting old. I'm winded from having walked up 3 stairs. I'm in my 40s now. Hi everyone. It doesn't say it on my badge, but I actually come from Harvard Medical School. And I actually got tenure last year, which means now I can really speak my mind. And if the dean's watching this on the internet, forgive me. But what I want to say to you as a Harvard professor is that, and my thesis for today, this talk, is that aging is a disease and it is treatable. And I think we can do this within our lifetimes. And there are even clinical trials that are in progress that I'll talk about later, that are in progress right now, that have the potential to treat many different diseases at once. But I'm not standing up here, certainly as a Harvard professor. I don't think even tenure would allow me to survive saying we're going to live forever. I don't believe in that necessarily, not within my lifetime. But I do think Aubrey's right in saying that this is a question and a problem that most people ignore. If we have the first slide, have I got a clicker? Okay, these are my children. This is why I'm hoping to extend lifespan. I want them to have a great life, and I think that with the current technologies that I'm seeing come through the pike, and thanks to Aubrey, he's very gracious in saying that the company that I started is one of the leaders, this technology will allow certainly my children, if not ourselves, to lead vastly different lives than we saw in the 20th century. And they're very lucky for that. When I was in Australia, if you're wondering, my accent's Australian. When I was in Australia, I was a college student. I was like Aubrey. I was trying to shake up all what I thought were the zombies. We're all going to die. Do you know, this is really a real problem here. Do you not realize this? And they're like, yeah, just play your cards, deal it. And then what I realized was that we might be the last generation in human history to experience a normal lifespan. And I was pretty pissed off about that. Of the 10,000 or more human generations in all time, we're the last ones, and our children are going to be the lucky ones? Well, so I'm not as selfish as I used to be. I'm trying to help global health, as I'll talk about. But in those days as a college student, I really wanted to bring the future technology into today. And maybe, just maybe, if I and others worked really hard and Aubrey recruited more people into the field, we could have a big impact. And within our lifetimes, we would see these changes. And I'm here to tell you today that they have gone so much better. The technology is so much further than I really thought I would ever see in my lifetime. And it just blows me away. So let me tell you about what's happened over the last 20 or so years. You're wondering, what has this got to do with aging and drugs? Well, I spotted this button in the elevator on the way to my room just now. And it reminded me that, well, I'm not sure what this does, and I certainly don't want to press it. Bad things might happen. But my point is that what I try to teach my students and people I come in contact with all the time is try to think differently. Differently in a way that you might think is completely opposite. So Aubrey was talking about, let's just think, what if we could really do something about aging? What would that mean for the world? What would it mean for individuals? For example, in my lab, we used to have a map of the world that's upside down. And I did that just trying to jog the minds of my students to think differently. And it's very hard to do. I think it may be very difficult, if not impossible, to teach. But I want to do a little experiment here in this room and see if I can maybe make a little headway into the aging field. So I think that Aubrey did a very good job, but I'm going to try a different tack, in case you're not convinced yet that aging is something worth working on. And I ask this question quite often. I ask medical students that I teach at Harvard, how many of you think that aging is a disease? And so let me ask you, do any of you think that aging is a disease? I have one hand. So that's more than I get at Harvard, so that's good. I like that. Now, let me define aging and disease for you. If you go to the Merck Manual of Geriatrics, which we use at Harvard, you open it up and it says, a disease is something that occurs over time that is deleterious and horrible, and it happens over time to less than half of the population. Okay? What is aging? Something that happens over time that's horrible, that happens to the majority of the population. Now that's a very strange cutoff, don't you think, between aging and disease. Let's try another switching of the map upside down. let's imagine that all the people in this room are taken to another planet. Okay, sounds weird, but just go with me. And on that planet, people live to be 300 years. It's possible, okay? Now, what would happen as us, as collective individuals, as we started to get into our 80s, and if we're lucky into our 90s, we would get crippled, and, we couldn't play tennis anymore, it would be horrible. And the people on that planet, they'd send their doctors over and they'd say, boy, look at that group of people. Don't go near them, you might catch what they have, okay? So apparently, aging, it depends on the health and lifespan of your neighbors. So I'm here today to tell you that I believe very strongly that aging is a disease. Now, why would that be a big deal? Now, Aubrey's right. What this means is that if you think about aging as a disease, you actually work towards treating it. And that really makes a difference. In the NIH budget, okay, so it's many billions of dollars, 0.06% of the NIH budget is given to studying the basic biology of aging. And I think it's because most people don't think of aging as a disease. It's something natural, something that's supposed to happen. And God forbid we might overpopulate the planet, which, by the way, is not the case. It turns out if we were to stop aging right now, which we couldn't, but if we could, the rate of population growth would be less than the rate of immigration right now. But that's another discussion. But I want to talk about thinking differently about aging. So Aubrey used a similar analogy, and I'm going to take it one step further. I too agree that our bodies are machines, like this car that's worn out, but I think that this is an old view about aging and biology in general. It's the Newtonian view of humanity. What we've been missing for the past, well, up until about 20 years ago, was the fact that our bodies have extraordinary amount of self-repair, and Aubrey did mention this. But I'm going to tell you about the identification of the genes that actually control these repair processes. We call these things longevity genes. Okay, and there's a whole family of them. There's probably about 20 or more of major genes that control aging in simple organisms like worms and flies and yeast. And we find these genes in our bodies as well. And there's increasing